Welcome to Point of Growth with me, your host at Makarichi. I'm sitting here with an old friend of mine. We haven't been together for quite some time, and I want to introduce you guys to the Chief Executive Officer of the eHub, which is a local TV show that is coming up. You guys need to look out for that. It's going to be on your screens soon. It's already been on your screens. It's just that the lockdown had paused stuff, but I believe we are going bigger this coming year. So he is also the former chairman of the Toastmasters, the Leadership Institute of Southern Africa. And he is, by profession, a corporate trainer and a speaker. Somebody that is within the circles of what I do. How are you doing, Andrew?
Very good, thanks. How are you?
I'm so excited to have you on this podcast.
Finally.
Yeah, it's been a long time that we've spoken about having you on this podcast, if you still remember.
I remember vividly.
Yeah, but COVID had got us tied up, and we are broadcasting this live here in Johannesburg. We had to come all the way to Johannesburg to get Andrew. That's how much.
What a privilege this is. Thanks for coming through.
Yeah, man. So I want to talk to you and just give an overview to some of our listeners to get to understand what it is that you guys do. Maybe let's start, for instance, by talking about who's Andrew.
How much time do you have for that?
Let me give a minute or two to talk about who's Andrew. I know it's going to take long, and thank you for asking how much time I have on that. Otherwise, we'd spend the whole day here.
Nah,
so
not
Andrew?
really. So Andrew is, as you know him, who takes no losing lightly. You also know that Andrew was always out to set the pace.
Yeah.
Commonly and popularly known for loving the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And so
One
more or
day that
less
brought us together as well.
exactly.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, that's more of the nutshell of what Andrew is all about, but genuinely interested in seeing people or training and developing people to be at their peak performance. That's what you would...
I'm in love with the fact that you brought in the aspect of training and seeing people grow. The Point of Growth podcast focuses on how do we develop our people and be better. Let me put you on the spot for a second. You at some point go to do training. Mercedes-Benz, you go to different companies. I just mentioned that to be specific because it's a big brand that people can relate to. And I wanted to ask you this. What is that one thing that you identify that you would say, not specifically the company that we mentioned, but what would you say is one of the things that people in bigger brands that work for big companies sometimes tend to overlook, which is essential for the growth of their businesses too?
Emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And emotional intelligence obviously encompasses a lot of other things like problem solving, like communication.
Yes.
But emotional intelligence becomes the key element that I find that is lacking in many of our corporates. And it's obviously, if we're to really go down to it, it boils down to self-awareness.
Right. So when we speak about emotional intelligence, maybe one question that we could address right now is somebody wants to know, what is emotional intelligence? What are you talking about when you say emotional intelligence? Let's just have that broken down to us by Andrew.
Emotional intelligence is relating to people.
Yes.
People are emotional beings.
True.
We are known as emotional beings. Anything that we do is emotional.
Yeah.
So emotional intelligence is how do you relate to people to build relationships. And that for any conflict that you encounter, for any experience that you have, whenever things don't go right, there is a need for emotional intelligence. And for relationships to grow, whether personal relationships or professional relationships, emotional intelligence is the cornerstone of that.
Wow. You've nailed it, and I believe our listeners are benefiting from this. So when you speak about that, let me address specifically to leaders and managers and people that are in positions that give directions to the people they lead. What is that one thing, apart from emotional intelligence, that you think they also need to keep in mind or look into developing?
Communication skills, I think, are the key element in that setting.
Yes.
Obviously, anything that we do as leaders is really about solving a certain problem. You are serving a certain cause that is there.
Very, very true.
So your ability to communicate that, because you're not going to be doing this on your own.
Yeah.
When you're a leader, you do this with people around you, and the ability to communicate the cause and how to solve the problem that you're dealing with is a key element. And hence I say communication is possibly the key element in that setting.
Okay. No, I understand you. Now, I want us to talk about this real quick. The aspect of being a public speaker. Let's just talk about how did we get there? How did Andrew become on the platform? And let's not talk about I've always done this since I was a child.
Well, if that is the case, like, you know how it goes.
Yes.
I really genuinely did start this from a childhood age
Of
at
course, yes,
11 in school, in primary school, and it became something that I found solace in. I enjoyed it, but professionally in public speaking, it's something that I decided to do as a hobby. And then through Toastmasters, my involvement in Toastmasters, I got invited to speak at various corporates, and that's how eventually I found myself in the stages that I never assumed I would ever be in.
You know, that makes me feel like we need to address and inspire also the upcoming speakers out there. Let's talk about that gap before you started getting paid for speaking and having to juggle up everything, you know, putting together the material that you have to go and present, how to get there, and so forth, marketing yourself, positioning yourself in the professional space. How do you get to go about that as a speaker, as an upcoming speaker rather? We are referring to the Andrew before he was paid to speak.
Right. So I've got a friend of mine who says trust the process, and the process, you don't overnight become a professional
True.
paid public speaker.
Yes.
You've got to trust the process, and part of the process starts with you having the willingness to become that person, right? You need to identify, and sometimes identifying this means looking out in the industry and seeing who do you want to almost be at the same stage as.
Yes.
We've got the Les Browns of this world that are topping when it comes to motivational speaking, and we've got our locals champions that speak and move mountains. But it starts with having that admiration for other people who have done it before. Learn their journey,
Yes.
right? It's not a journey that you walk alone. You learn through others. What have they done? That's the first thing. The second thing that I would recommend is be widely read. Reading is going to expose you to many things. And I think for you to be able to serve the audience, because that's what you do when you're a professional paid speaker, you serve the audience through something that you would have learned, and then you transfer it through speech. And that's, for me, the reading was another big part of it. Let's talk to the marketing.
Yes.
Marketing is not like you're going to be a product in a store that's going to be waiting.
It's a different thing. You're offering a service.
You're offering a service. So part of offering the service, the person who's buying your service needs to have experience of your service. So sometimes you find that you do a lot of free engagements, free gigs where you go and speak, whether it's for you, depending on the audience that you're looking for, whether it's going to schools where you go and share your message, or maybe in certain organization. It can even start within your team at work, wherever you are. The idea is that is how you market yourself. And obviously, when we look into social media nowadays, it has how many things come together. And so your social media presence, whatever you do when you speak to people, remember it's about serving the audience, about its current need.
Yeah.
So your social media presence is also going to be a good aid in your development as a professional speaker. And that's the whole journey that I went through. I also got to a point where I remembered that I always needed to learn from others. I needed to have a teachable spirit. So what I thought was great public speaking when I was a child was not what I realized is what I need to be doing.
I mean, I can agree with you on that. For instance, the first time I got experienced by I got affiliated with Toastmasters at some point. I then picked up that there are things that we call R counties and so forth. So if you're not putting yourself as a speaker in such places for development, then you're going nowhere. So I think I agree with you on that. Yeah.
It's, for me, that was, like you mentioned Toastmasters, it was a major developmental area, because I got to learn to have the power to tell my own story and use my story to inspire other people. Yet before then, what I would do is I would go to Dr. Google, search for as many quotes as I can find, make them come out in a sentence, in a paragraph, and then that would be my speech. But now I realized I wasn't connecting with people.
Yes.
And until I told my own story, I was able to inspire through the connection of others. So learn to receive feedback and review it so that you can apply it to become better. And I think that is the journey that, as a speaker, you continuously need to go through. That's your Kaizen. That's your continuous improvement.
Great. Now, you spoke about feedback, and that makes me feel like asking you this question. What is the craziest negative, whether constructive or not, feedback that you received from a client or from one of the people in the audience of an event that you spoke at, or whether you're an MC, whatever that you were doing there that is related to public speaking? What was the most negative feedback that you can say up to now that still comes to your mind, per se?
Damn, I have to think. I think it would be, I don't think it was the most negative, but it was the most prominent at that stage.
Okay.
It is, you're too deep for your age.
Okay.
So I genuinely get invited to speak, but maybe they invite me in because they're like, this young guy.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when I get to speak about certain things, certain situations, and because I infuse a little bit of emotional intelligence, which
Yes.
is what I've studied, I get to learn that sometimes it gets too deep for people. It gets uncomfortable.
Yes.
So I've been
It's not a
always
subject that everybody wants
no,
to
no,
have.
no, no, no. So I get to touch nerves, and that is something that I've been warned to say, hey, people might not like you. It's the truth, but people might not like you, and we need to be cognizant of that. And so
Very true.
every time I get to get the privilege of being on stage, I need to remember that not to really be too deep or too nervy
I hear you.
in a sense.
Great stuff. Now, one of the questions I have for you is, now you get booked for an event, and you're ready for the event. What do you do before you become ready? What process do you go through as a speaker? Let's talk about Andrew for a second. What does Andrew do after knowing that? Let's per se start from the engagement of a client just calling you to want to discuss your fears and stuff like that. How do you go about the whole process of preparing yourself for the event?
So I think for me, the first thing that I need to know without a doubt is what value add am I expected to bring.
Okay.
It's all good and well to be a motivational speaker at a year-end function, but I need to understand what motivation am I giving to that audience. What are they struggling with? Because motivation is a big concept.
Yeah.
Right? So they might be struggling with sales. So sometimes I need to go and motivate salespeople to be persistent.
Yes.
They might be struggling with just a situation where it's retrenchment. So I need to be able to help them see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I need to be able to identify what value add am I bringing. So that's the first thing. Before we even really discuss about the charges and the fees, it's understanding what value add am I expected to bring in a certain organization. So that's the first thing. Once that is clear, and obviously that's a very intense process because sometimes they just think, well, no, we just want a motivational speaker. But it's a problem when you just want a motivational speaker because you will not be able to value what I'm going to bring up.
Yeah.
And I also need to be able to prepare accordingly. So hence, they say in speaking, we call it knowing your audience. What is it that your audience really wants? So
Okay.
that's the first step.
Stage, yes, yeah?
And then following that, it's obviously understanding, the logistics.
Yes.
Are we speaking to a group of 100? Are we speaking to a group of 20? Are we speaking to a group of 500? When you know those dynamics, you know how to position yourself.
Yes.
Right? And again, those logistics could involve, am I going to be using a microphone? Am I going to need to belt out? Am I needing to use PowerPoint? Am I needing to use a flip chart? Whatever method, techniques you use, those are logistical elements that are key. Where is it going to be? Is it in an auditorium? Is it a classroom seating setting? What kind of setting is it? Because that also affects how you deliver your message, right?
Yes.
The time also involves, do I need to be engaging in a sense of, do I need some feedback verbally or do I need emotional feedback? Because again, that's a dynamic that needs to be involved. So all those logistics are part and parcel of understanding where it is. And then the setting. So sometimes I get invited because it's a year-end function or it's a conference. A year-end function, you're likely to be the only speaker.
Yeah, most probably.
Right? So you now know the showstopper is I. Then at a conference, are you the opening speaker? If you're the opening speaker, you need to raise the energy.
Yes.
If you're the closing speaker, you need to show stop.
Yeah.
So that ability
Stopping
to
with a
understand, stopping it with a bang or
Yeah.
ending it with a bang, you need to have a memorable message that leaves them on. So your ability to understand the logistics behind that are also going to be imperative. And once I know those logistics, now I need to prepare. How do I align myself with that? I research more about the organization.
Yes.
What are the challenges? What are the experiences? Who are some of the people that have been high flyers so that I can relate to them? I don't want to give them an example of someone who is out of their geographical area, who they cannot relate to. I need to be able to relate. And what experience do I have in that? I don't want to tell them something that's on the internet. I want to tell them something that I may have experienced that I have the right to tell the story around. So that's more or less the process I go through right up until the day I know what I tire to wear. I know how to psych myself up. If it's a religious organization, I've got my Christian music that psychs me up, and I know what to reference to it.
Yeah.
If it is a young youthful party or engagement, I also know the amapianos
Some
to
rap
play.
lines.
Nah. Now we're doing amapiano, so we
it's
don't
now
do.
time for amapiano.
It's now time for
Nice.
amapiano. So it works that in that setting, and that's how it
I
progresses.
feel you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we are not drifting away from the topic that we're focusing on, emotional intelligence. I just want to ask you this question. Emotional intelligence makes sense to somebody who's in corporate more than somebody who's just at home. But if you really look at it, it's those people that are at home who also need to be emotionally intelligent to ensure that when they get into these professional setups, they do not get undermined, they do not get to take things in the wrong way. You
Right,
understand?
right.
So how can we help our fathers, our brothers, our sisters who are unemployed or at home? How can we stay intelligent emotionally?
So my mother reminds me every time that charity begins at home.
Yes.
Obviously, in other contexts, whether it's cleanliness and any other things, but I've taken that in every setting. Charity begins at home. So when charity begins at home, what does it mean? It reminds us that we need to be able to start at home. So yes, it makes sense in corporate. No. It shows up in corporate. Siblings work in a history.
Yes.
Two different settings.
Yeah, of course.
I need to understand my brother is strong in financial management. I'm strong in spending the finances.
Of course.
Right? And now when we are secure with that, then it helps us know when do we call on each other to get support. In a relationship with a couple, you also need to understand and recognize that, all right, I've got my wife is strong when it comes to organizing things. I'm strong with connecting people. So that relationship, that understanding of that relationship means you now need to leverage off each other's strengths and support each other from each other's weaknesses so that you're able to grow. But where you then find yourself in insecure positions, and I call them insecure positions because that's where someone is fighting with another person where they are not strong in. So Messi would never be a defender.
Of course.
He's a striker.
It's impossible.
Right? And he does not get jealous at a defender
Yeah.
who does his work very well.
He appreciates
because
his position.
He appreciates his position. He's self-aware. He's not insecure.
I hear you.
The same thing
That's
with
it.
us.
Yeah.
We need to learn to be secure with, and that's self-awareness, the beginning of the cornerstone of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Your ability to identify your own emotions and seeing how those emotions manifest in other people's relationships. So for me, it starts by us getting to identify our emotions. Do you know how you're feeling right now?
Wow, what a powerful line you're ending with. Now, as we are getting to the end of our podcast, we've been sitting here talking and time is not on our side, and I would love to milk out a lot more information, but I feel like, as we're about to go, just give us your top 3 principles that you prioritize, that you say these are my top 3 non-negotiables. Things that you can't compromise on.
Learn to win.
All right.
Learn to win is my number one. Learn to win.
So you don't accept losing. Maybe that's a question a person is going to have to say. If you say learn to win, what are you saying?
When I say learn to win, have a winning mentality.
Of course.
Too often we see failure as the end of an era.
Yeah.
You can entertain failure as the beginning, the middle, but never the end.
Wow.
And so for that reason, for you to have that, you need to have a mindset of winning. Learn to win. We need more winners to inspire more people to do something.
True.
When your light shines, it inspires other people to get their own light to shine. Imagine if you won in whatever setting that you are in, whether it's in entrepreneurship, you inspire your siblings to do the same. You inspire other people around you,
People
inspire your
around you.
community.
Yes.
So we need to have that learning to win.
Of course.
So
we
that's
lift as
my
we
one.
rise. You're number 1. Let's get number 2.
Number 2, serve.
Yeah. Wow.
Selflessly serve. We are too encountered with people who are selfish nowadays.
Yes.
And we see this in our corporates, we see this in our churches, we see this in our continent at large. And if we only had selfless people who were willing to just be selfless, I think we would go a lot
The world
further.
will become a better place.
The
Wow.
world will become a better place. And I don't want to go far to the world. I'm concerned about the continent for starters.
Yeah.
So let's selflessly serve. And last but not least, this one is tough. Solve problems.
Solve problems.
Solve problems.
All right.
Solve
Wow.
problems.
Wow. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. He has spoken, and I believe we all can learn from this episode. And thank you so much, Andrew, for coming to chill with us here at Point of Growth, the podcast that we recently launched during lockdown. And I hope that this can help a few people become better and be intelligent emotionally. Shout out to the people we work with here at Black Spot Media. And thank you so much for tuning in. Stay blessed and God bless.